What would you say if I told you that one of the greatest Islamic scholars of the 12th century, Al-Idrisi, drew the world upside down? Don't say that's impossible. Because he really did. So why did he do it? Was it because people simply didn't know enough at the time? Or was the world actually supposed to be drawn that way? Let's take a closer look. Where are you right now? Maybe you're on a bus. Maybe you're scrolling through your phone before going to sleep. Maybe you were just looking for something to watch and happened to find this video. Either way, I want to ask you something. How many times have you looked at a map and thought, wait a second, where am I? You've opened Google Maps, zoomed in, put your finger on the screen, and said, there I am. We take that for granted. So much so that we rarely stop to think that someone had to dedicate their entire life to making that possible. I'm a historian living in Istanbul. I'm 28 years old, and there's something strange about living in this city. Every morning when I leave my house, I'm standing in both east and west at the same time. One side of the Bosphorus is Europe, the other side is Asia. And this question of standing between two worlds and looking at the world itself is actually a very old question. The man I'm going to tell you about today stood in that exact place, and from there he drew the world. His name was Al-Idrisi. The year is the 1100s. If you're picturing a blurry, stereotypical version of the Middle Ages from a school textbook, erase it from your mind. Al-Idrisi was born in what is now Morocco, but he spent much of his life in Sicily, at the court of the Norman king. Think about that for a moment. A Muslim geographer working in the court of a Christian Norman ruler. And that ruler, King Roger II, gave him a simple mission. Go learn about the world, then come back and tell me about it. For 15 years, Al-Idrisi did exactly that. He gathered travelers, merchants, sailors, pilgrims. He listened to everyone. He compared their stories, identified the gaps, corrected mistakes, and assembled the pieces. And what emerged still amazes us today. Last month, I got lost inside Istanbul's Grand Bazaar. Yes, I know. I've lived in this city for 14 years, and I still get lost in the Grand Bazaar. That's just reality. As I wandered through that maze of streets, I started thinking, if a medieval merchant left here and wanted to reach Cairo, what did he rely on? What did he have in his hands? That's where Al-Idrisi comes in. The map he created, known as the Tabula Rogeriana, or the Book of Roger's Map, was completed in 1154, and it was the most comprehensive and accurate map of the known world ever produced up to that point. Europe, Africa, Asia, all brought together on a single map. But wait, there's one detail. On Al-Idrisi's map, south is at the top. Yes, you heard that correctly. Al-Idrisi drew the world upside down. You begin in the south and look toward the north. Africa sits at the top. Scandinavia is at the bottom. Why? Because to him there was no such thing as up. There was no universal rule saying maps had to be oriented a certain way. In his world, the south was where much of the knowledge came from. The Arab world, African trade networks, Indian ocean routes. So that was the direction he chose to face. Centuries later, when Western scholars encountered his map, what did they do? They turned it upside down. North had to be on top. Let me ask you something. How many times have you ever wondered why north is up? Probably never. I hadn't either. But when I first studied Al-Idrisi, it felt like a mental wake-up call. Al-Idrisi didn't just draw maps. He wrote books too. One of them was called Nujat al-Mushtaq, often translated as the pleasure of him who longs to travel through the regions of the world. Even the title tells you something. Pleasure. For him, geography wasn't a dry academic obligation. It was curiosity, wonder, the desire to explore. In that book, he described climate zones, ocean currents, trade routes, the ways different peoples made their living. He even included details about local plants and animals so specific that modern researchers still ask, where was this man getting his information? Now think about what many Western mapmakers were doing during the same period. They often placed Jerusalem directly at the center of the world. Not because of geography, because of theology, because that was where they believed it belonged. Al-Idrisi, on the other hand, worked with coordinates, distances, and climate regions. In many ways, his approach feels surprisingly modern. There's something else I'd like to mention. One of my professors at university once said, "A good historian doesn't judge the past through modern eyes. A good historian sees people through the conditions of their own time." I didn't fully understand that at the time, but I understood it when I studied Al-Idrisi. Think about the world he lived in. No printing press, no satellites, no GPS, no photography. Most information traveled by word of mouth. If someone gave incorrect information, you couldn't always tell whether they were lying or simply mistaken. Your measuring tools were extremely limited, and yet somehow, under those conditions, you're expected to place the coastlines of Norway, the Gulf of Guinea, and the Caspian Sea on the same map. Al-Idrisi did it? Was it perfect? No, but he did it. Now let's get to the real question. Why does Al-Idrisi matter? Not simply because he drew a map. He matters because he created one of the greatest syntheses of knowledge in his age. He combined the Islamic geographical tradition, classical Greek sources, especially Ptolemy, his own observations, and hundreds of eyewitness accounts. His work wasn't built on a single civilization's knowledge. It was built on many, and he did it in a royal court under the patronage of a ruler. Norman Sicily was one of the great crossroads of cultures. Arabic, Latin, Greek, all spoken side by side. Al-Idrisi stood right at that crossroads. And every day in Istanbul, standing between the two shores of the Bosphorus, I sometimes feel something similar. Being between two worlds can be exhausting, but sometimes it's exactly where you want to be, because from there you can see both sides. Al-Idrisi's map was copied for centuries. Arabic, Latin, French. Dozens of versions were produced. Some preserved south at the top, others flipped it around, almost as if every generation added its own understanding of the world. And that's what I find so meaningful. Knowledge gets passed down, but it changes as it moves. Each generation reshapes it a little, rotates the map, enlarges some regions, shrinks others. You think you're looking at the world, but often you're looking at the way someone taught you to see it. I think Al-Idrisi understood that. Maybe that's why he put the south at the top, as if he were saying, look, the world can be seen from here too. And here's the fascinating part. For a long time, Al-Idrisi remained largely unknown in the Western world. When Orientalist scholars rediscovered his work in the 18th and 19th centuries, many were astonished. This early? This accurate? Some even struggled to believe the work was genuine, because their assumptions about the period didn't match what they were seeing. But the map was there, engraved onto a massive silver disc, created in 1154. Sometimes the greatest discovery is realizing that someone else already knew what you're only now beginning to understand. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear more voices from the East that shaped history, make sure to subscribe. Every week I share stories that most people have never heard, but that matter to all of us. And the next time you look at a map, pause for a moment and ask yourself, why is North at the top? Al-Idrisi's answer would be simple, because we decided it should be, and perhaps we can decide differently. If you have thoughts about this story, leave them in the comments. Your perspective might inspire someone else. Don't keep that opportunity to yourself, my friend. Until next time.